Ladies and gentlemen, this is another episode of the I'm Telling God About This podcast. We're going to do a quick cold reaction. I don't know if anybody has seen this, but at the, what is it, in Hague, Netherlands, they had a...
The Hague?
The Hague.
Oh my gosh.
Whatever it is.
We have fans in Europe, man. We gotta do better.
So they ask
too, I bet.
That's true. Don't let me read. But then they had to ask the question about one of the guys calling Trump daddy. So I want to see what you guys think about this. So here we go.
Hello. Deborah Haynes from Sky News. Mark Rutte, the NATO chief, who is your friend, he called you daddy earlier. You
Marco Rubio.
NATO allies, kind of children.
No, he likes me. I think he likes me. If he doesn't, I'll let you know. I'll come back and I'll hit him.
Marco Rubio just can't hold it together in the background.
Hey, Daddy, you're my daddy.
Do you regard your
You're my
NATO
daddy.
kind of like children, and they're obviously listening to you, and they're spending more, and you're obviously appreciative of that. But do you hope that actually they're going to be able to defend themselves, defend Europe on their own?
I think they need help a little bit at the beginning, and I think they'll be able to. And I think they're going to remember this day. And this is a big day for NATO. You know, this was a very big day. They took it. One of the gentlemen said, you know what? We've been trying to raise money raise the rate for 30 years, he said, 20 years, from almost the beginning. And he's been there for a long time. He said, until you came along, it never happened. What you did is amazing. It's been sort of an amazing day. For a lot of reasons, but also for that. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you think they can do it without you, though, in the future? Can they do it without
Well,
the
ask
United
Mark.
States?
I mean, you have to ask Mark.
That's not my job.
He said, they call me daddy.
Do you know it's
The context of that.
Okay.
The actual context. The actual context where, you know, Trump talking about the problems around the world with Iran and with and Israel and Ukraine and Russia, and this guy that is the part of the UN Council or whatever was talking as a kind of a path of speech or something with Trump. And he's like, yeah, it's like the children are arguing, and you know, daddy has to come and yell at them for a little bit.
Oh.
And that was it.
And
so
what
then,
happened
of course,
was-
the media made it
not
seem
wrong.
like he was calling him daddy, and which in that
Yeah, and
context, yeah, he was.
For people that
He
don't
is-
know, they're talking about defense spending allocated by nation into NATO, and it had.
Oh, is
been
that what it was?
It had been
Yeah.
2%. Most nations weren't even doing the 2%. So much of what Trump did was making and forcing everybody to come to the table, but the U.S. has always been at 5%. So Daddy basically said, you all are going to come to the table and pay your 2%. And then kind of in the last minute, he was like, I'm going to twist all of your arms now, and it's going to be 5%. And they all agreed to it, and I think the vote was unanimous.
the art of
So
the deal?
that's where
It's weird how that
that's where
works.
he got the daddy. Daddy came to the table and laid down the iron fist, and everybody got in
you-
line.
Okay, but like, what analogy? How is it not appropriate militarily to imagine that America as the father and
It's so
these
perfect.
NATO countries
It's not. There's a term for this. It's called hegemony. Like, we're your dad. America is your
Exactly.
dad. All right. You pick. You can go try to pay mom against dad. You know, go. You know, nuzzle over with China or Russia for a little bit. But at the end of the day, when daddy comes home, you know what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
That,
I mean,
that seems perfectly normal to me.
I agree.
I just think that
I
my
probably
favorite part
made
about
that
that
analogy.
I think my favorite part about that clip was Marco Rubio losing it. Like,
Oh,
he's
yeah.
because he's always. I don't know if
Agreed.
you've Marco Rubio this entire time during the administration. So since he's been a part of it, not a smile, not anything, just been deadpan, rocking it. Which is like, look, that's how I want my leaders. I want them. I don't want them showing emotion. I want them just, you know, taking out and delivering the tasks. And then all of a sudden, with this whole daddy task, he just,
Dude, and Marco Rubio-
he just lost it, man.
You got to
Little
think
Marco.
too. This guy, little Marco, yes, he's holding the water. Whenever Trump decides to like, or whenever they decide to like, hey, we're going to cancel this or cancel that, you know who becomes the interim boss?
Interim
Rubio.
boss is Marco.
Marco Rubio.
Wouldn't they say
But
that he was the interim boss for like
the interim
Pope or something?
for everyone?
Or the
Yeah,
interim-
exactly. He's going to be interim pope.
Interim Pope for Ron.
Well,
So-
because they keep shutting down departments and just making Marco Rubio the head of them.
That's right.
Got,
They're just rolling him into
job
state.
titles.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, for so many of them, it was State Department anyway. That's good because, that is the whole deal. It's like, hey, we don't need to expand our bureaucracy. This organization, we already have a department that's supposed to do this. Like, have it have centralized leadership, have it that reduces redundancy. It makes a lot of sense. But I'd say that's something I've really appreciated about this administration. And I say it across the board is just the candid, like the reality of things being less scripted and less polished, like across the board. I think it's refreshing to a lot of Americans to see a president say like, that's ridiculous. And to just go with it and show answer the fool according to his folly, or to just see, the Secretary of State just lose it because it was a ridiculous question. Because all the people in it's like a mutual lie, right? Where everyone says, I'm going to ask this ridiculous thing very seriously. And they're going to respond very seriously because this is a very serious meeting. And then they ask their stupid question. And the person who, it's almost like the whole Trump administration, well, it's not that they don't know, they just don't care. They're just like, that was dumb. Why would you say that? Like, no, this is a very serious question. This is serious journalism. Seriously.
So today someone was commenting on that, and they were trying to connect the dots to a rise in populism and why that is being more well received right now. I'm curious what you guys think, because their argument was, in this season of the pendulum swing, the super raw, super real, unscripted politician is like in right now. And then we'll see the pendulum swing again back to like the well touched up decorum like political language style. I actually don't agree. I think with like, and if you connect it to like the rise of podcasts and long form and like long discussion, I think our culture is actually pivoting towards openness, honesty, transparency, lack of polish, and more authenticity. And I think it's going to stay. Yeah,
I think it's exactly that. It's a direct response to it. It's like when something is polished, that means it's prepared. If you come back with a canned answer, you didn't think or process through anything I just said. You just gave me whatever, right? And so it doesn't seem authentic. It could even be true, but it just doesn't come across as authentic. And that's what people want. They want authenticity because public trust is at an all-time low.
Exactly.
And
they lose trust.
That's it. And that's what it comes down to. And so the same, go ahead.
False. I think that's a false binary. The idea that your authenticity and your decorum are like two ends of the same spectrum, and that what we're seeing in an increase in authenticity necessarily follows from a loss of
decorum,
like norms, standards, process, that kind of thing. I don't think that's the case at all. I think what you're seeing is a consequence of the fact that people on different sides of various issues, whatever they are, no longer believe that their opponents are operating in good faith. And so there's no point in having a pretense or maintaining respect for process or institutions or things like that when the other person doesn't care. The whole point of having those kinds of things, like the idea of like a parliamentary debate or things like that, those are processes by which you work things out with people who mostly agree with you about foundational issues. Those are not processes by which you handle serious existential fundamental disagreements. And so what you're finding is that because society has two totally, or at least two totally incompatible ways of looking at the world, none of that platform that used to be for working out social cultural differences is fit for purpose anymore.
That's a good take.
Yeah,
I
and
like that a lot.
I agree with that. But I do think that it's not a binary, to your point. Like, it isn't one is true or the other is not. But there's multiple.
I expect decorum, I expect civility, I expect all of those things that you would say we're generally losing in our political realm. I expect all of those things when I go to church.
Yeah,
and I'm going to extend those things to people in my church to a greater degree than someone who rudely accosts me on the street in some way, or if some leftist podcaster comes up and holds a microphone. Like, I'm not going to going to presume the same kind of sincerity that I will when I have a good reason to think that other people are sharing a significant portion of the ideological and religious foundation that I do.
Yeah, I agree. I think the thing though that you see here, it's two things happening. It is that, but it's also it's a common mechanism that we use in discourse and any kind of debate or conversation, which is when you break decorum, you're doing so for emphasis, either to emphasize authentic emotion or to emphasize, a point by stepping outside of the societal norm. And that existed before and still exists. And I'm not saying that, and I think we saw this, like Mark Driscoll's a great example of this in the church. I'll use him as an example of that. That was the big issue that a lot of people on the East Coast had with Mark early on, was that his tone and his attitude and his way of speaking and the way that he talked about things was considered completely unacceptable by establishment churches, but it resonated as authentic in that culture, and that's what drew people in, because every other in that context of the early 2000s on the West Coast, people were inundated with this faux universalist postmodernist narrative. And so for someone to come out and speak in a way that didn't align with their perception of what Christianity was or what church looked like, it was beneficial, and it had a place. And so that's why I'm saying, like, I agree with what your point is, which is that decorum works when we have enough shared ground to have civil discourse and discussion. I think the issue is right now that is just being presumed, but it's not there. And I think that's what you were saying too, right? Is that like these systems are existing, like people are still going along with the decorum, even though we're nowhere near each other on the spectrum. And so there's no way it would work.
The breaking of it, though, is handled in an extremely bad faith way. Because what you'll see is someone they're not rejecting, or they won't come out and say, I reject the limitations and obligations that these norms and attitudes of civility require of me. I don't reject those in general. What they'll say, no, this specific case where I want to do something different is so extreme that I have license to break it, but only here, only in this one specific spot where I want to, right? Because you've been hateful or whatever it is, right? And then the moment the other side responds or is tempted to respond and kind of is like, oh, you can't just go breaking the norms. We have rule. And so it's not even a generally acknowledged things that the norms are gone. It's just emotionally bullying people, saying like, oh, well, if you hadn't been such a meanie, then I wouldn't have had to break the norms. But now that we're through that, now that I've gotten what I've wanted by breaching them, I'm going to need you to go back in the box and start being, being
Which leads me to my next point. This is why we shouldn't lose. Losing is bad. Okay? Because if you lose, then the other team gets their chance to play. And we don't need that to happen. So, pay attention.